On a rainy December afternoon, 7 cavers decided to explore the Binkley Cave system. The weather forecast predicted less than an inch of rain, so they felt confident going on their several-hour journey into unfamiliar sections of the cave. They were supposed to be out by 3 a.m., but when 3 o'clock came and went, no one had heard from anyone in the group. I'm Tatiana Bunch, and this is Occurrence. All sources can be found at occurrencepod.com, which is linked in the show notes, along with any other relevant information. Without further ado, the group of cavers were experienced hobbyists, wanting to do a survey of Binkley Cave. Specifically, they wanted to map past a section called the D&B Crawl. Binkley Cave was in Indiana, about 25 miles west of Louisville, Kentucky. Their plan was to be out in 15 hours. The area they wanted to map was a section of the cave that very few people had been to. And because they were experienced, they did something a lot of other caving stories I've covered haven't. They had a surface watch. A surface watch is the person that doesn't go in the cave, but will be available to reach out to for help if the caving group needs it. You basically tell them your plan, and if you don't stick to it or if anything goes wrong, they can tell the appropriate people everything they need to know to try and help you. So you tell them what cave you're going to, what area of the cave you'll be in, where the cave is at, where your vehicle will be left, and who is going with you. And you tell them when you plan to be out of the cave and who they need to contact if they don't hear from you at a preset stop everything and get a rescue team time. So with that established, the group entered the cave. After several hours, they reached the D&B Crawl. The D&B Crawl is a passage that is narrow and has a low ceiling. You have to crawl to get through it. When they got to that point, they noticed standing water with barely any airspace over it for them to breathe and hold their heads up while they passed through. One of the cavers was hesitant to crawl through, though, but most of the others were willing to continue on. There was over 100 years of experience between them all, and they knew there would be a little rain, so most of them just weren't too worried about it. So they started talking it over and considered splitting into 2 groups. While deciding who would be in each group, someone realized the water level was rising fast. In a matter of minutes, the water had visibly risen, so they didn't continue to waste any time and quickly decided to retreat. Around 8:30 p.m., way before the out time, the caving group set, a landowner who knew about their trip reached out to a local caver named Anmar Mirza. Anmar was also the national coordinator for the National Cave Rescue Commission. Binkley Cave has many entrances, most of which are on private land, but in 2012, the Indiana Speleological Survey started investigating a connection between Binkley Cave and another cave called Blowing Hole Cave. They eventually found a connection after digging through both caves, and the Indiana Caverns, which is what that system ended up being called, was opened the following year. They created a public entrance for people to explore Binkley. As of 2023, they have discovered the system to be over 40 miles or 64 kilometers long. Knowing that, it's possible the landowner owned the entrance they use, which is how he knew. However, I wasn't able to verify that information. But the landowner was worried because the rain, which was supposed to be less than 1/4 inch, had fallen more than 2 inches and wasn't slowing down. He was worried about the water level of the river rising in the cave and knew Anmar was familiar with the skills and capabilities of everyone in the group. They both knew the cavers weren't aware of the weather getting worse. So Anmar put a gauge to monitor the water levels inside the stream and told local cavers to be ready for a potential rescue. He only told a small number of people originally because there wasn't anything they could do at the time. He said, quote, "I limited the number of people I put on standby to allow people to get a good night's sleep, and to limit the number of people who felt compelled to go to the scene in spite of the fact that there was nothing that could be done. Temperatures that night were going to fall below freezing, and we did not need the additional logistical load. End quote. By 4 a.m., the cavers were still missing, even though the rain stopped. They were supposed to be out by 3 a.m. By 6:30 that morning, the cave's river was 4 to 5 feet higher than normal. The commercial part of the Binkley Cave system at Indiana Caverns had a gauge. It showed that over 4 inches of rain had fallen. While all of that was happening, the group of cavers underground realized the situation was getting worse and tried to make their way out. The river that was just a trickle on their way in now had a strong current that was pushing water back into the drier areas of the confined space they were in. It quickly rose to over 5 feet deep, blocking their exit. They managed to find higher ground in a mid-level tier of the cave and tried to be calm. If anyone started to panic, they could endanger themselves and everyone else trapped. They watched the water and ate some snacks that they packed while they waited. They packed some supplies since the trip would be several hours, but on the way in, they placed water bottles along the route they were going to take back. They did it to lighten the weight of the bags they were carrying, but with the flood, they couldn't get to them, and they were probably washed away anyway. So they put the supplies they had left in a pile and shared granola bars and dried fruit. Someone even packed a little bit of summer sausage and shared that too. Around 6, they had actually made another attempt to leave because they thought the water was low enough, but they were forced to go back to their camp because the main river route they needed to go through to exit hadn't turned back into a gentle stream. It was dark and rushing, and with how much it had grown, they knew it would reach the ceiling in multiple places they had to go through to get out. At this point, they worried if anyone knew they were there, since they couldn't communicate with anyone on the surface, and they thought, everyone probably thinks we're dead. Risky ideas were considered. They could try to leave through a longer river route. That way, have faster and more dangerous water, since the water was draining in it, but it was technically an option. They could try a shorter route. There was more crawling, which may be more dangerous, but again, it's an option. They could try to send the braver cavers to either one of those routes, or try another path, but the risk stayed the same. Leaving increased the risk of hypothermia and further exhaustion trying to navigate the passages that were definitely filled with water. Injury was possible, and splitting the group meant fewer resources for each party. Laura Damaris was a caver in the group, and at this point, she had been shivering in a cold and wet trash bag for over 20 hours. The 6 other cavers were in the same condition. They were all huddled together on the muddy ground in a crawlway with a ceiling too low to even fully sit up. There was a tea light candle burning, and everyone lost feeling in their arms and legs a long time ago. Every now and then, Laura thought she heard the voices of rescuers, but no one showed up. So the group had a choice to make. By 9:30 a.m., Anmar knew it was time to begin rescue operations. He contacted the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, or IDNR, who had cave rescue training and maintained good relationships with local cavers. It was also their jurisdiction, so the IDNR alerted other authorities. They had to navigate the sub-zero temperatures outside the cave, the near almost freezing water inside the cave, the chest-deep waters, and the lack of rescuers familiar with the cave route to the caver's location. So they made 2 teams. The first initial response team was made up of 3 experienced cavers, and they didn't enter the cave until 1:10 p.m. That was when the water receded enough for authorities to give the go-ahead. One of the team members, named Tim Pride, knew the trapped group's plan. 34-year-old Nick Benton, who was familiar with the cave and had been caving most of his life, joined him. The third member was another experienced caver named Shane Miles. So that response team's plan was to bring extra food and supplies to combat hypothermia. Their goal was to reach DNB Crawl, since that was the furthest point in the cave where the high water stopped the crew from leaving. And then they were to report back by 11 p.m. Initial Response Team 2, made up of 2 strong cavers less familiar with Binkley Cave, was supposed to join the first response team to an area of the cave called the Mountain Room. From there, Team 2 would split off and report back by 5 p.m. from the Mountain Room. They all hoped that the trap group was in that first area waiting for conditions to be better. But if they weren't there, the first team would just continue on to find the group, while the second team let those in charge outside know what was going on. From there, they could adjust their plans as needed without holding up rescue progress and wasting more time. 2 of the missing cavers were also very experienced. I mentioned Laura earlier, and then there was Rand Heaslett. Rand had been caving for at least 30 years. He started when he was in high school. Laura was certified with the National Cave Rescue Commission. Everyone hoped having those 2 in the group helped the group make safe decisions after they realized how bad their situation was. When the rescue teams entered the cave, they had to pass through water that reached up to their waist and got as high as their necks at times. Even though the water receded and was usually ankle deep, some of the passages flooded up to the ceiling. Nick and the others were wearing appropriate wetsuits, but with the weather outside being cold and the water being around 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, it was slow moving. The trap group was about 4 miles deep into the cave, and the rescue team made it 3 of those 4 miles when they found a message written on the mud on a bank of a stream. The message said the group was safe and gave their location. This gave Nick and the others the hope they needed to quickly find the group. Around 5:30 that evening, the rescue team neared the area called Fantastic Avenue when they smelled something terrible. They went to check it out, and the smell went from just terrible to fantastically terrible, because when they found the cavers there, all huddled together and alive, it became the best thing one of the rescuers says he ever inhaled. I can only imagine what it was like considering everyone was wet and muddy and wrapped in trash bags for over 30 hours at that point. But the rescuers were personal friends of Laura and part of her cave family, so being able to see her and everyone else together and mostly okay was probably the best thing ever. The rescue team gave everyone space blankets to help warm them back up and warmed up some soup and more food. Laura's group had a stove that they were able to heat up water to make soup and tea, but it wasn't much, and being in that environment so long still took its toll. The leader for Team 1 guided 2 of the missing cavers out by 10:50 that night, 10 hours after the rescuers entered the cave. They confirmed with everyone on the surface that everyone in the group was safe. Other response team members followed the remaining cavers out at a much slower pace, so an evacuation team was sent in to help move things along. And the final 5 cavers left the cave in 2 groups about 15 minutes apart, but everyone was out by 3 a.m. I'd say the group's preparation and Anmar's careful coordination paid off since all the cavers were rescued, but some might question their decision to enter the cave knowing the rain forecast. And it turns out, one team member decided not to go on the trip because of weather concerns. The others, however, made their choice based on the forecast available that said the amount of rain that was going to fall was 4 times less than what it actually was. Laura would later say that most cavers should pack to be self-sufficient for 24 hours with the supplies that they bring. They take calculated risk and don't rush into danger, but they are human and sometimes miscalculate. I'd say her mistake was trusting the weatherman. Being a bit more prepared gave that group the cushion they needed to stay safe and relatively healthy until help reached them. They were all able to walk out of the cave and were treated for hypothermia and exposure after spending about 40 hours in Binkley Cave. No one required a hospital visit. I'm sure they were happy to see the fried chicken and coffee that awaited them when they made it out. The effective rescue response of around 50 responders and many cavers definitely shows how proper preparation and collaboration with local cavers, rescuers, and landowners can lead to a positive ending. Be sure to follow or subscribe, and if you have thoughts about this episode, leave them in the reviews or comments, depending on where you're listening from. Stay safe, and I'll be back next week.